Josh. Thank you for coming. Yeah, it is morning, right?
Yes, it is.
I'm here with Joshua Rose, who is the editor of many magazines, including one I brought here. I'll show you, American Fine Art. And my favorite, of course, is the the Western Art Collector. He also does American Art Collector, and of course, Native American magazine. Yes. So, pretty busy guy, aren't you?
Pretty busy, yeah.
So yeah, right now you're doing a show, right?
I'm here for the Great Southwest Antique Show down in Albuquerque, which is a beautiful show. And last night I went to the Gala for the Millicent Rogers Museum.
Oh, how was that?
It was great.
Yeah,
it's
I usually
a really
do
good
that.
event. Yeah, it's at Monte Sagrado, and nice turnout, and they did really well.
Yeah, for those who don't know the Millicent Rogers Museum, that's in Taos. And it's got one of the greatest collections of Maria and Tony Days that you'll ever see. The family gave it to them, and it's really, to me, it's always worth the effort to go up to Taos to see it. It's on the north side, I guess, of Taos, but yeah, I love that place.
Yeah, it's a great.
But I couldn't have done a gala last night. I was trying to get the podcast ready. We're in Santa Fe. Doing this podcast instead of Tucson. I got to come up here to capture all the interesting people that come through this town, and there's a bunch of them.
There's a lot.
And I literally grabbed Josh's arm and out of a booth yesterday to say, "You've got to come on to my podcast," and so here he is.
Yeah, woke up this morning in Taos and did that beautiful drive back. I mean, it never gets old looking over and seeing the gorge as you round that one corner. It's just gorgeous.
So I've got a lot of questions for you.
Bring them.
Yeah, bring them on, baby. All right. So I just kind of, I've known you for 10 years at least, right? So how long have the magazines been going on? You've been the editor for how long?
Okay, we started American Art Collector first. That was about 13 years ago, and we saw the need for that style of magazine for that market, and then we learned about the Western market and started that about 2 years later. And then we started American Fine Art about 6 years ago, and then Native Art about 2.5 years ago. During Indian Market, that's when it came to me.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to that, but I want to know how. So about 11 years ago, more or less. So I've known you for at least a decet.
Yeah.
But I never have gotten to get the backstory, and so I want to get the backstory and everybody else. So where'd you grow up?
I grew up I was born in D.C. My father was an attorney in the Justice Department in D.C. And
so what do you think of all this stuff that's going on right now with the Justice Department? That's a pretty high-powered profession your father had.
Well, he was in the antitrust division. Yeah. And so the first year the ASU Law School opened up, they asked him to be a professor. So we moved out to Tempe in 1968. I was a year and a half old, and he joined the faculty at the law school, and so I grew up right there, right around ASU, right around the law school, doing all that, and
I didn't get any answer what you think is going on, but you don't have to. We'll keep it apolitical. Yeah. So you grew up in
Tempe,
Arizona.
Yeah,
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I grew up in Tempe, and my father, he supposedly retired about 5 years ago, so he was at the law school for 45 years.
And did he teach at that law school?
Yeah, contracts, antitrust, legal ethics, and now he's writing books. And
so did he know James Bilak?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Very well?
Yeah. So, and the whole crew. He was there. Yeah, I think the second year the law school opened is when he joined.
Wow. Yeah. So James Bilak, for those guys who don't know us out there, he's a wonderful collector of Native American paintings mainly, and he donated his entire collection to the University of Oklahoma at OU, and you can go see that collection. It's an amazing collection. And so your dad writes books. What kind of books is he writing now?
He was always contracts, antitrust. That was kind of his area. And then about 15, 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, he got interested in English legal history.
English legal history.
Medieval English legal history. So he taught himself paleography, started learning, reading medieval Latin and French documents.
Oh my God.
And then he just wrote a book on some aspect of English legal history for Cambridge University Press.
Wow. So very technical. And do you know about that? So you must know a lot about the law. If you grow up as a kid of a professor in law, you know a lot about the law, don't you?
Yeah, and I have an older brother he's an attorney as well, and I thought about that field for a moment, and then a mutual friend of ours, before I went to grad school, and we'll talk about that later, but I interned at Brown and Bain And I was like, do I go to law school? Do I study literature? Like, what do I do? And the lawyers used to pull me in their office and say, study literature, don't come. That was at Brown and Bain, you know, with Suzanne and Jack and all them. So, so I took the other out.
Yeah, you figured it out. So when you're growing up as a kid in Arizona, because that's really, so you look at Arizona as really as your home.
Yeah. And then both my parents are from Minnesota, so we'd go there every summer, and that's where their families are from. So I'd see my grandparents and cousins.
So that's a Norwegian. Where are they from exactly?
They're from St. Paul.
So that's all Norwegian stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, my dad's family's German, and my mom's family was Russian. So,
interesting. Very cool. So. And so, as a kid growing up, did you have interest in? You must have. You said you were interested in literature, but did you have a great interest in writing and reading and that kind of thing?
Oh yeah. You know, both my parents are both English majors. They're academics, so they always pushed it and always talked about it. My dad loves Faulkner, and that crossed over. And my grandfather went to a little bit after him, but he went to the same private school that F. Scott Fitzgerald went to. So it was.
And where was that?
In St. Paul Academy in St. Paul, Minnesota. So.
And was he your grandfather? He was also from that area.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they always had us read and, you know, talk to us about reading, and I loved history and the American Revolution and Civil War, and you know, so it's always something that.
So history is important to you.
Yeah.
Which makes sense now.
And then in college I studied literature, and now I can't read fiction. I don't know why. So everything I read.
Except the Bloom Murder Mystery series.
Yes, that's right.
That one I'm sure you.
That's the last 7 books I've read, of fiction I've read, and I used to read everything, and now I love. You know, nonfiction, you know, artist biographies and things like that.
And do you think it's not so much that you don't read it because you don't like it, but it's a time issue and you have so many other things to do?
I don't know. I just think there's so much stuff I'm still trying to absorb that I decided, you know, it'd be better to learn things, and you know, and I think I always have a love for literature. That was always my first love. That's how I got into art. But right now it's a lot of nonfiction. So
you're reading artist biography and things like that? I love
things like, you know, New York in the 30s, and you know, it talks about the artists and who was around at what time and what they were doing. You know, I love those kind of books.
And what have you read anything interesting of late you can recall?
I've been reading a lot of Joan Didion lately. I've decided she's one of the best writers of our generation. I just can't get enough of her prose. She's a beautiful writer.
And do you spend a lot of time writing? Yourself?
Not as well. That's kind of the tragedy for me, is that I got into magazines because I love to write, and that's all I used to do. But now, as the editor, you do everything but write. Yeah. So every month, I'll grab a couple stories and I'll tell my team, "Don't touch these. These are mine. I'm writing them, and no one come near." So I still try. Sometimes I end up getting a little too crazy, and then I have to hand them off, but I still try to do.
Yeah, you've written some articles even for some shows that we've done.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I was like, wow, look at that. Yeah. Editor's writing this one.
Well, I love to write, you know, and you know, it's like everything else. It's, you know, that's where the passion kind of starts, and that's how it kind of got it all going.
So you're growing up in Tempe, right?
Yeah.
And you go to Tempe, what's the high school there?
Marcos Deniza High School.
And so what kind of kid were you? You're a writer. Band, maybe?
I was a writer. Yeah, well, my older brother is like, I don't know if you've met him. He is all-state football player, Ivy League, like the whole thing.
Oh, that's so hard to follow that.
So, you know, so I played sports. I love football. I love baseball.
So you played both sports in high school?
I played baseball growing up. I played football in high school. And then I think my sophomore year, I said, you know, I was like on the school newspaper, on the yearbook, and I got opportunity to be the sports editor. So I decided, I don't know if I used it as an out or what. But I said, okay, I can't play anymore, and now I'm going to write. So I started writing then, and I was pretty quiet until I was about 15, and then I kind of, you know, blossomed out, and you know, so I started writing then, joined the newspaper, and then just kept going. And then so my father, I don't know if you've ever met him, Doug Gerlach. He was he lived in Tempe, and he was a law student. He's an attorney now, and he worked in the athletic department, in the media relations department at ASU. And so he was a student of my dad. So he said, well, have Josh come over to I was like maybe 13. He said, have him come over to the baseball games, the ASU baseball games, and he can help out in the press box. So I went to junior high about a mile and a half from the ASU baseball stadium. So I'd ride my bike after the game to the ASU baseball games, and I'd get them all drinks and hang out and listen to them all tell their stories and all that. And then I'd ride home and stop at the law school, and my dad and I would ride our bikes back home, not every night, but probably 3 times a week. And then about 2 years later, I was about 15. The Tempe Daily News at the time said, "Well, why don't you just start writing about the game?" So I was a correspondent, and I started writing like regular sports stories in the newspaper when I was.
So at 13 is when you first went and watched these games in the press booth.
Yeah.
And were you kind of absorbed with what was going on from a writer standpoint?
Oh yeah, I loved it, and I think I spent every waking moment from about 6 to 13 reading the backs of baseball cards. That was my first love. So going there and seeing it and seeing these guys write about it, and that's when first they would just go to the office after the game and write the story. Then they remember those giant it was like a telecom, and you put the phone on top and it would transmit the story.
Actually. Yeah, I've seen them in movies too.
Yeah. So then they started having those, and just the whole thing, and then just writing about it. I was 15. I'd go down and interview the players.
And so that's when they said, "Why don't you write about it?"
Yeah.
And what kind of players were these? The AA, AAA kind of stuff?
Or ASU, the college games.
It was literally ASU.
It was like Barry Bonds. It was that era and stuff. So that was.
And did you interview Barry Bonds?
I never did. I saw him many times, but and I think my dad. I think when I was about in 8th grade, he's the one who kind of saw my kind of love for writing and kind of steered me towards journalism, and that's kind of how it all.
And so you got out of the sports. You started writing for the yearbook.
Yeah, and then I think my junior year, my senior year, I became the editor of the whole magazine, and really, then just was taken by it all. And
so you go to ASU? Is that where you went to college? Thank God you didn't. Okay, good.
I got into the University of Minnesota.
Okay.
And
Gophers, right?
I was Golden Gopher, and that's where. And my dad went to University of Pennsylvania, and my brother went there. All our family is from Minnesota, though, and I was. At the start, I was doing journalism. That was my idea. Didn't last long. And Minnesota had a great, a lot of those Big Ten schools have really good journalism departments.
Correct.
So I went to Minnesota and did journalism. That lasted about a year. And I didn't want to take classes on writing leads or anything. I wanted to, read. And so I became a literature and a philosophy major. And then that's what I finished off at.
So literature and philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you finished that in what year is that?
Let's see. I graduated from high school in 85. I finished Minnesota at 89.
Okay.
And then I took a year to kind of figure out. And Minnesota was amazing. I'd always knew my grandparents because we'd go back there every summer.
Right. It's kind of your second home, really.
Yeah. But then to be able to see them and as more of an adult and borrow friends' cars and drive and see my grandparents and take them and go see our aunts and uncles, and it's just it was really a beautiful opportunity for me to kind of get to know them, as a little older.
Right, and person. You have this year, so you've got your degree in philosophy, which we know that's a really a valuable degree, and literature.
And then so I came back home. To Arizona, and I worked at Brown and Bain, and I thought, what am I going to do next?
And that's the law.
Yeah, the law firm. And
were you like clerking kind of stuff?
Yeah, they called it document. That was back in days when they actually had documents, and so they just have these stacks of documents, and you have to go through them and organize them. And
sounds absolutely horrible.
It was crazy. Yeah. And
did your dad at that point go, "Yeah, I love this, son," because you're?
Yeah.
Did it?
No, he kind of he never really after that original he never really he just said do what you love. But the beauty of that was Suzanne Brown galleries. So I was working in the galleries, and there'd be Ed Mel's on the wall, and all those.
And they were floor cover to cover, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
She had all down the hall.
So I talked to Howard Post last week, And he was telling me exactly about that he would, if Suzanne hadn't made a sale, that she would get her husband to go buy an Ed Mell or a Howard Post or a Merrill Mahaffey, because she wanted sales to happen, and they'd just keep hanging it higher and higher. And Howard had no idea of this until he showed up for a party one time and saw all the paintings.
All the paintings. Yes.
So you were surrounded at that time by those guys.
Yeah.
On the walls.
And it's funny because Ed's now one of my closest friends, and I didn't know him at the time, but I think there was one right in front of me at the where I work.
But you actually recognized the art. You saw it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because not all young kids do. You're like 22,
21,
maybe, right?
Yeah. And then go back a little bit. So I'm graduating from college, literally the day I'm graduating, turning in the paper, and my junior year of college, I went and did going back even further, when I was in third grade, my dad went on took a sabbatical for a year, and we lived in Southampton, and he taught at the university there, and I went to third grade in England. And so, it was always there, and he likes to see everything. So we went to every church, every cathedral, every altar. So
you're getting exposed to art.
Yeah.
And lots of it.
And it always stuck with me. And then, my junior year, I did a semester abroad, and it was called Literature in London through the University of Minnesota. So I went in London, lived there, and then afterwards traveled around Europe. And then, so I had an amazing time. So as I'm walking down the halls, literally to graduate from Minnesota, I see this poster on the wall, and it says "Study Literature in Wales." And I'm, being the romantic that I still am, I thought that's what I'm going to do. And so I came back home, got a job at a law firm. Literally the day I got back, 8 to 5, saved up money, and there is a school, it was called the University College in North Wales. And I loved William Blake's my guy. So they had a William Blake expert. So I thought, I'm going to go to Wales and study North Wales, and study poetry by William Blake for a year. And my parents are like, well, what are you going to do with that? I'm like, I don't know. And then my dad said, well, I'll pay half. And so you take care of the rest. And, I don't know how. I still was thinking about this the other day. They had I got the American Student Loan Department to recognize it, and the school wrote a letter. So I got a graduate school loan for it, And I remember my dad was on the phone with some relatives. He said, well, Josh thinks he's going to Wales, but until that check shows up, I don't know. And literally 2 days before, I get this check from the student loan department, $10,000. And he said, okay, that's good. And I went. And
so you got to go study poetry.
Yeah. So I lived in North Wales, Bangor, or they say Bangor.
Yeah.
So I lived in Wales for a year, I did my master's thesis there.
And was that on?
William Blake.
It was on William Blake.
Poetry and art. See, that's the thing. So Blake was a poet, or he was an artist, and but he wrote these beautiful poems, and he illustrated them all with these incredible visionary drawings. So the English academic system is different. I didn't really have classes. This is I'd go meet with this expert on William Blake, and he'd say, okay, read this and this and this and this and this and this, and come back, write these articles, come back. So you're just immersed in that one subject.
Do you have any poetry you remember from Blake?
I love Blake. Yeah, lines more. Yeah,
Let's hear it.
Everything that lives is holy.
Let's hear a little bit of Blake. Could you do it?
Everything that lives is holy. That was Blake's line. I love that line. I think that's perfect. He's amazing.
So it really that really stuck with you, and not only his poetry but the paintings as well.
Yeah, and what is amazing about Blake, and it translates to art, is that he created this, and I think all great artists do this. He created this vision, and then he almost became a part of that vision. It's almost like he's a character in this own world, whole world that he created. And I think all great artists, do that. They become kind of a persona in their own kind of within their own world. And his was a visionary and internal world of poetry and art.
And when did he live and die?
1757 to I think 1824. So it was right. There was a lot going on. It was right before the Romantics, but they loved him. I mean, Wordsworth and all the Coleridge, they loved Blake because he never left London. He lived in this tiny apartment with his wife the entire time, and he was just that people would come to the door and he'd be covered in printer's ink. I mean, he did so much, and so he was kind of and had been forgotten. And so he was rediscovered by them. Then he was rediscovered later by William Butler Yeats, and then he kind of stuck. And it wasn't until like I think 2000 maybe that the Tate did this huge William Blake exhibition of his art.
I remember that actually.
Yeah.
Did you go to it?
No. By then, by the time the exhibition had already left. I already graduated and moved back, but it was right when it happened. So
you spent a whole year.
Yeah.
Learning about Blake, and it also got you your master's as well.
Yeah.
And what was that? A master's in what?
It was a MA in English literature.
In English literature.
Yeah.
So now those are two really good fields.
Yeah.
Philosophy and English literature.
Well, and you know what? And now, just like you said it, now it's like now it feels like. I think, was that my life?
Yeah.
Because North Wales is beautiful, and it's right on the coast, and so you cross this beautiful. It's called the Menai Bridge. You cross this beautiful bridge, and then you're in Anglesey. And Anglesey is the island where you leave if you take the ferry to Dublin. But it's also the last stronghold of the Druids. Mm-hmm. So it's this tiny little island. So I had this little 10-speed bike I bought the first week I was there, and I would ride across this bridge, and then I'd ride through this island, and literally you see these fields, and there'd be like a miniature Stonehenge, like two rocks, and
wow.
set up in some farmer's field.
That had been there for 1,000 years
thousands
or longer.
Of years,
yeah.
and it was just there.
And you were smart enough to recognize what that was at that point.
Yeah, and I would I'd go on these rides, and I loved it. It was on the very few not rainy days, and there'd be lamb running through running through the field, and one time there was this. They said, oh, there's this Celtic burial ground or something, and you have it's something you have to see. So I wrote. It was called Bryn Cethli Du and or Thu, Thu, and or DDU, but it's pronounced TH in Welsh. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go there. So I go there, and I finally see the sign for it, and it's literally in someone's backyard. And so there's like a woman in the window, of the farmhouse, and then I had to wait until the cows are gone, and I walked out. And it was a burial ground, like a mound with a little, door in it, and
right.
And I was watching. There's a show called Destination Unknown on Travel Channel. It's that Josh Gates guy, mm-hmm. And yes. I was watching, and I totally forgot about this place, completely forgot, and I was watching it like a month ago, and he went there. I was like, oh my God.
And that was the exact place you went to as a kid.
Yeah.
And did you relate to that with Native American art growing up in Arizona? Had you seen Chaco or gone to any of those places?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We did, we hit all the spots. My parents were very involved in the farm workers movement. And so there was, I didn't know this, but they told me there was a period when I was in preschool where I went to a Yaqui Mexican English speaking preschool. So, so it was always, I remember one time we were driving and Cesar Chavez got in our car and we took him somewhere. And it was like,
that's very interesting.
So my dad was really involved in all that. And
you think being exposed to those mounds and those things related in a way when you started getting into Native American art, because you have a Native American art magazine. Have you ever considered that as being part of it or not?
I think so, and just that being around it and seeing art and poetry, right. And reading it and and just kind of taking it all in, and just kind of opening up to it, and living in Phoenix. When you live in Phoenix, when back in the 70s, mm-hmm. When people come to town, you took them to the Heard Museum. That's right. What you did when your relatives came. That was the older part, just the old building, and and I went to grade school in Tempe, and we'd take 2 field trips a year, and it was always to Pueblo Grande. That was the one, because it was right by the school. The buses could get there. It was like easy to go, like the annual field trip to Pueblo Grande. Right. So, growing up, you're
exposed.
You're exposed. You see it.
And
all.
Was there something in the herd that you remember or still like to go to? Because some of that stuff's like the Kachinas are still there.
Oh yeah, the Kachina collection. Those always got me, and Hopi has a special place in my heart. It's just such a beautiful culture and a wonderful place. And being from Arizona, it's almost like you don't realize that's part of Arizona. It's like, wait, the oldest continually inhabited villages in the country are here in our home state.
Yeah, that's right.
And you just go up and they're all there, and you can see them, and nobody even really thinks about it, or it's and it's all there. It's all there.
And so few Arizonans that sometimes they don't even know it's right in their backyard.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you go there, and it's all and my friend Owen Sinjin, who I know the jeweler, and he's half Hopi and half Navajo, and he's been really generous taking me up there, and his family still lives on First Mesa, and going to their house, and
experience it,
seeing it,
changes your viewpoint when you see it from that aspect.
It really does. It really does. And the first time we went up there, he took me everywhere. We went to Pasture Canyon and the dinosaur tracks, and
Did you have your bottle of water so you could see the dinosaur tracks?
Yep. Newspaper Rock, and the river, and Coal Mine Canyon, and Keams Canyon, and we went and visited Wes Willie, the jeweler, and he lived up in Jedediah at that time.
Jedediah, probably.
Jedediah, and we went up to see him, so we drove through and stopped at Keams, and then we he's good friends with Sunwa, so we stopped at Hope Villa and saw her place, and it's just, I've never been to a dance. That's my goal. I'd love to see that.
You have to be invited now.
Yeah, but just being up there and
used to, you could just show up and go, and
really.
Oh yeah, it was all. If you go and look at I have all these things of Maynard Dixon. You'd see all the imagery. He lived there for 4 months.
Wow.
Was involved with the dances and things.
Wow.
But they've had to close it, and rightly so, because it's it's their world, and it's not ours, and we have to respect that. And, but you can get in, but you need to have a friend, and they have to really sponsor you.
Well, and then becoming really good friends with Ed, and hearing his Hopi experience, and that's how he started.
Yeah,
going there.
Now we're talking about
driving his motorcycle through those canyons, and he stopped one day at night and said, "This is what I'm going to do. This is it."
And he taught there.
Yeah, and he taught there.
That was the turning point for Ed Mell, is what he's told me, is when, he's in New York, being very effective and a great illustrator. He's doing National Lampoon covers and things like that. And then he gets an invitation to go teach summer school in Hopi, and he's from Arizona, just like yourself. He comes back, and he is just so affected by the surroundings and the people. He goes, I think I gotta leave New York and get back to Arizona, and he does.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
It affected you, affected him, it affects a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I want to go back a little bit, just because I want to find out. So you're in England,
right?
And did you ever consider staying? A year there.
Yeah, I looked at some other programs.
And now you're an English literature person.
Yeah.
So.
I looked at some other programs and thought about staying, and I don't know. I finished my master's I remember telling my professor I'm going to finish it, by September. He said, "There's no way you're going to do that." And I ended up doing it. And part of the master's there, so it was smaller papers and then a larger, 75-page thesis, which I still have that no one reads, but it's on my bookshelf. And so, I guess I just, when you're away from, when you're living outside of the States, you really get a intense affinity for it, and you get homesick and you miss things. And I'd started dating someone right before I left, and so I was like,
so you're missing the girl, you're missing the Mexican food,
Mexican food, missing Arizona, missing and reading Faulkner and all those things, and it makes you want to get home. So I think I was ready. So
you came back, and then what?
So I came back, and it was 1991, middle of the
recession.
Yeah,
I opened my gallery in '92, so I want to just hit it at the worst time.
Yeah.
So you come back.
I was like, "Hey, I have a master's in poetry.
English poetry.
English. Who's gonna hire me?"
Right.
And so, of course, no one did. So, and then I moved in with the person I was dating, and we ended up getting pregnant and having a baby and all that. And then I started working for a credit card company.
Yeah.
And then I was writing on the side. So do you remember Java Magazine and Robert Centenary? So he was a friend. So he hired me, and some of my first articles were writing for him for those magazines. I remember one of the best things I've ever written. I'll have to dig it out for you. Where it was my girlfriend at the time, who ended up being my wife for 14 years. Her dad lived in Nogales. Well, he'd go down to Nogales. He was from Mexico, and so he said, there's still bullfighting in Nogales. I'm like, what? You're kidding? He's like, yeah, there's a ring and everything. So her and I and Robert, who owns Java, and another Jim Cherry, decided to drive down there and watch these bullfights. I think they're over Easter. And
to write about it.
To write about it.
Yeah.
So I said, Robert, well, I'm driving, we have gas, we have a hotel, and I think I got paid $25 to write this story, maybe 50. I think it was 50. I said, can I get a little bit more money? He said, okay, I'll give you $25 more. I'm like, okay, deal. So, and there was a Tucson, you probably know him. There was a guy from Tucson who went down and did all this photography of all the bullfights down there.
I don't know that, but I may know the artist, but I don't.
So we went down there and watched the bullfight. And there's a ring in Nogales, and they have kind of a circuit, and they brought these real bullfighters from Mexico and Colombia, and it was like the real thing.
Yeah.
So that was like my.
What was that like?
It was incredible. Yeah. It was amazing.
Did it bother you to see the bull being killed?
The final part is pretty disturbing.
Yeah, I would think it would.
Yeah. I had never seen one before. The best thing ever written about bullfighting is in D.H. Lawrence wrote a book called The Plume Serpent, and it's kind of his falling in love and then falling out of love with the kind of the people of that area, and it's just so brutal and disturbing, that the first scene in that book where he talks about going to bullfighting and watching it, and I think I definitely connected to that.
Yeah, I mean, that is as brutal as you can.
Yeah, I love animals. And to see it
man
all,
against beast, and then the beast always loses. Usually.
And the bullfighter was called El Milagro because he fell from this bell tower in his hometown and survived. So they called him the Miracle, and he was incredibly good looking and flashy and had the whole suit on. And it was towards the end, and it was wrapping up, and the bull almost died. The bull almost got him. So even at that minute, at the very end, when you think the bull's tired, nothing's going to happen, one false move and you're done for. Yeah. And he had to roll. They roll, so he rolled out of the way. But yeah, it was pretty. But it was a event. So there's the Mexican orchestra in the stands, and you can only buy 2 tickets, shady or sunny, Sol y Sombra.
So you totally went with the sunny because it's cheaper.
Of course. I think it was $1, and
that's a lot.
And so that was one of my first writing experiences.
And you liked what came out of that?
I liked that kind of writing. I liked being able to just writing about experience,
observing,
feeling.
You could the setting was a lot easier probably for you to. Well, especially in that, I mean, the sweat, the fear, the taste, everything.
Yeah, and I interviewed the bullfighters. My first wife, we were married 15 years. She's such a beautiful woman, and so I was trying to interview the bullfighter, and she was translating because she's from Hermosillo, in Sonora. Her family was, and so I would ask her these questions, and she would translate them into Spanish, and then the bullfighter just would say, "You are so beautiful. What is your name?" That's not the answer to the question.
No, in fact, you're going the wrong direction.
Right. So that early writing, and then I started teaching ESL, English as a second language. I had 50 jobs. I was working constantly. Yeah. And then I just kept writing, and I thought, okay.
And this is nonfiction writing. This is more in the vein of the Java thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is 90. Gosh, when would that be? 92, 93,
yes.
Around there, and then that. Then I started. So I thought, okay, so someday I'm gonna, find something, that I really love, and I thought, I have a master's I could teach, and then I thought, okay, well, I worked at the credit card company for about 3 years, and then I got hired by Phoenix College to teach English 101 and 102 and those kind of classes, and it was all part-time, how they do it.
And how was that?
I loved it. I was 23, and they're like, "Are you sure you're the teacher?" The students were like 18, so I was like, but it was just it's a neat school, and it was just a great experience. I really loved it, and I always loved to teach. I love that that thing you get through students and that connection, and then I thought, okay, well, this is what I want to do. And so I quit the credit card company, and my parents said, "Are you crazy? You can't." I'm like, "Okay,
that's a real job."
And I said, and no one will give you experience. No one will just hire you. They want experience. So I thought, well, who is going to start a school? How are they going to start a school and make me a teacher? And the Art Institute of Phoenix opened up
just at that time
in '96, and they hired me to be and I was the first full-time teacher at the Art Institute of Phoenix. And that was like 96, 97, and I taught English and humanities and art history and just,
And how long did you do that?
I did that for about 9 years.
And what was your favorite course when you were teaching that?
World literature. World literature. I taught Dante and the Odyssey and the Iliad, and those are.
So you kept learning at that point too, because when you're teaching, it's you learn a lot.
You have to think about it.
You have to think.
And my grandfather went to Yale. He graduated, and he went for 2 years until his father passed away, and he loved Virgil, and he used to quote the Aeneid to me. So so
you come really from a long pedigree of reading, writing, literature.
Yeah.
And then you teach. So you teach for 9 years.
So I taught but in that, so around 1996, do you remember Get Out magazine? It was the East Valley Tribune's week. It was the Arizona Republic did the Rep, and East Valley Tribune did Get Out, and it was the Friday supplement, arts and cultural supplement. And so like 1996, I called the Get Out, the editor, Jess Harder, and I said, hey, I want to write. Do you have anyone doing book reviews? He said, no, we don't do book reviews. But do you know about art? I'm like, yeah, sure, I know about art. I just studied William Blake for a year, and I'd never written about art before, and I just fell in love with it. And I wrote their weekly art column and art stories, every art story for about 3 years.
So would you cover the museum scene, the gallery scene, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I cover all the gallery shows and some of the, and the museums and the cowboy artists. It's funny.
And this was in the mid to late 90s?
Yeah, 96 to about 2000. Yeah.
And you would cover the Phoenix Art Museum's Cowboy Artists of America show?
Right, and I had no idea at that time, and I was actually, this is a funny story, I had no idea in that time that I'd be back involved in that. I didn't even, I had grown up around it, I had seen it, but I was young and thought everything should be contemporary and was not a fan. And in April, the Cowboy Artists of America invited me on their annual trail ride.
Oh, wow.
And I told them this story. And so, I was 23 years old. I thought I knew everything, I guess, and thought everything should be contemporary and modern. And so, but I'd always had affinity for realist art. I'd always loved it. So they said, okay, you got to cover this, Cowboy Artist show. And I said, oh, what is cowboy art? I don't know what cowboy art is. Are you kidding me? And so they sent me up to Carefree. And they said, okay, this artist, go talk to this artist. I'm like, all right. So I go up to this beautiful house. I drive up there, beautiful house, Ray Swanson. And he lets me in. And I ended up staying in his studio for about 3 hours.
Which was filled with great Native American art,
with
too.
Great Native art all over the walls. And he was literally the nicest and most compassionate, generous person I'd ever met. His wife met me at the door and let me in and showed me to his studio. And I left. I'm like, who the hell do you think you are? Like, are you kidding me? And it really changed my views to not, never to, assume or think anything. And
so you were questioning yourself, not Ray Swanson, but who the hell am I?
Who am I?
Josh, to make decisions of what's art and what isn't art.
Here's this wonderful, beautiful human being who like is dedicated to his life to this profession and doing this wonderful work, and it really opened my eyes up to Western art too, and that was kind of my first experience with it, and it really stuck. And unfortunately he passed away before we started Western Art Collective.
Yeah, because he would have been a wonderful cover, wouldn't he?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. But I've told that story to Martin Greeley. I told it to all of them, and they got a kick out of it. But it's true. That's how it all started.
Well, it is, and
me.
I think art. If you bond to an artist, and people don't realize this sometimes, but an artist should know this. But if you make that connection with an artist, it's more than just the artwork. You have a connection mentally to who that human being is. And it can change and affect the way you see everything. And it did in your case with Ray Swanson, because he was a wonderful human being, great artist, but by his personality coming forward, it allowed you to enter his world. And once you were entered into that, then you said, okay, let me see more.
Right,
And it could have been just the opposite, too. If he had been an individual, you go, oh, my God, I don't like this guy. And now I really hate his art. It's like a restaurant, if the servers are terrible, it doesn't matter how good the food is.
That's true, right. And if there's an artist that you don't like, that you buy his painting, then you meet him, you're like, And you're like, I don't want to hang this in my house.
That's true.
I've done, that's happened to me.
No, it can happen. It really can.
Yeah.
So you start writing for this magazine.
Yeah, for their like weekly newspaper, and it was good for me because it got me on deadlines and writing quickly, and and all that. And I still taught full time. Mm-hmm. So I was teaching at the Art Institute, then doing this on the side, and. But I met all the local art. This was early days of Phoenix art scene, not early like Crash Arts, but like Mars Art Space and all those. So I met all those early, guys and saw the shows and got to know the art scene. And I thought I kind of gathered all this knowledge, and then in about '99, the newspaper said, "Well, we're not going to cover art anymore." I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? And they're like, yeah, we just don't think it's a good idea. So whatever, and
not
so,
that interesting.
Yeah. And so I started writing.
And did the magazine last after that much longer?
Not much longer. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. When you start cutting out the arts and anything,
they don't realize it, but it affects it. And so I started writing for the New Times, and so I was writing their weekly art column for about a year and a half. And I wrote on the boarding school show when it first opened at the Heard Museum. Mm-hmm. I still think that's one of the most, my favorite pieces that I've written. And that's
appropriate. You reviewed my book, which is on the Indian school days.
I know, that's what I was thinking. It connected me to that. Yeah, those are great books too. I really love how you weave in the history and it's like reading nonfiction. It's fiction, but then you get
I try to put some history in there so you understand. You come away with more than just a go, oh, that was a great story. Hey, I didn't know that.
No, you learn stuff as well. Yeah, they're great books. And I still don't know when you write them. You must never sleep. It's amazing, seriously, what you do. And so I started writing for the New Times, and like the New Times, that's always ends up being a disaster because they're a disaster. And so I did that for about a year and a half, and then I started writing national things.
Wow.
So I wrote about Fritz Scholder back then when I was writing when he showed at Veneer Gallery.
And did you get to meet Fritz?
I met him once. Yeah. And
as an interviewer or just as a fan?
Yeah, just as an interview.
And what was that like?
I mean, incredible. Such a character and such a unique personality, and
In what way would you say too that? What was his personality like?
Well, it was later on in his career. And it was when he was doing those huge paintings of like vampires and all that stuff.
The Dark series.
And so he had the gallery owner and myself to unveil this painting, and he like went to put it behind curtains, and it was literally like, ta-da, here it is.
And which gallery was that?
That was it was Geraldine Veneer, but it was before Veneer Galleries. It was when it was I forget, it was on Marshall Way, like right just north of where Lisa Seti was. You know, when you walk in Wildmeyer, I forget which one that was. Maybe Joy Tash. It was Joy Tash.
And did you did they open that just for you in this ta-da moment, or was it for you and the gallery?
And the gallery owner, yeah.
And it was one of his big black vampire kind of thing?
Huge.
What was the gallerist's response?
She seemed a little
taken back?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was Joy Tash Gallery, yeah. And then the other person I interviewed was, oh gosh, no, I can't think of her name. but she's a real photorealist from New York City. She came down and did an interview and stuff like that. And I'm like, I love meeting people. I love it. It's the best part of my job. And so
it
just
is. I
meeting
agree.
the characters and the personalities and the art field. And that, when we started American Art Collector, jumping ahead real quick, everyone said like, well, in native and fine art, like, why are you covering the market? Like, are you, that's the most exciting part. It's the dealers and the personalities and the friends and the auctioneer. That's what's fun. The market is exciting,
Yeah, it's the whole ball of wax,
Yes.
the business part, as well as the art scene, because that's all part of it.
All of it,
and you're very good about covering that. You get good information on auctions and how they're doing in galleries and artists, and latest things. You covered this podcast, actually.
And people want to know those. The collectors want to be in tune to all that.
And your website's good too.
Oh, and it's getting better. Yeah. That's a new plug. We just started a redesign. But,
go ahead, give us the website name. Tell us what it is.
Well, we literally just signed the contract last week, but we're going to do all sorts of things where dealers will be able to put their entire inventory and all those kinds. So it's going to be really. And
will that be under Western Art Collector?
All of them.
So each magazine will have their own URL that would go to, including Native American.
And then the ads will be up on the website. So Mark Sublette, here's your Medicine Man Gallery, and there'll be a little kind of camera icon underneath there. So say you do an advertisement for Josh Elliott's show, they'll say there are 20 more paintings in the show, and we send the dealers, we'll send you kind of like a dashboard, so you can go in and upload the whole painting, so people can click on your ad in the magazine and then see the entire show and inquire about it. And
do you find that the artists and the galleries are asking for this kind of stuff, or are you giving them stuff they're going to want in the future?
Well, I think people say somebody told them, hey, you need to go do digital, and they're like, well, what is digital? So we're just trying to okay, here is a package that will involve digital then you don't have to worry about it.
Because don't you find, at least I do to some extent, that galleries and artists seem to be a little bit technologically challenged?
Yes, definitely.
That they're good at creating, but when it comes to the component of trying to figure out how to get their artwork out there, they're a little bit unknowing.
Definitely, without a doubt. And
not all of them. There's some out there.
No.
And I know you guys are going, I'm not.
And galleries usually it's the persons whose name is above the door, and they're going to be out doing what they do best, talking to clients, showing them new paintings, building those relationships, work in those areas. So sometimes the website or digital, and I personally I understand the need for digital, and I see it, but I love discovery. I wrote about this the other day in one of my editor's letters. I like, okay, it's noon, I have 3 hours, I'm going to go wander around down Canyon Road. And then you walk in and that sense of discovery, and I think collectors still like that. And, walk into a gallery and see, oh, who's this artist? I've never seen this before. What's it, and...
Well, you've been doing this now for over a decade. Do you find when you go into those places now they recognize you? They know who you are?
Yeah.
Is that good or bad? Because it takes a little bit of the discovery away if they're fawning over you.
Yeah, well, I think the best part about it is just showing me stuff. Oh, we got this artist we want you to see, and things like that, and that never gets old. I think that's still a main part of it. And then going to the back room and digging through stuff and finding these artists. And dealers are great. They're so enthusiastic about the artists that they represent, and and the new work, and finding these new artists in the first place. It really is. These artists are selling at these shows, and then the collectors know them through these shows. But what a lot of people don't realize is that to get into the shows, your gallery, the gallery found you, and then they got you to that, then you got to that level, then you started showing with these museum shows, and
so for you to find potential artists that you want to feature in your magazines, and there's 4 of them, really relies on you to some extent still going to galleries, looking, seeing, and exploring and finding. Is that right?
Yep. Oh, totally, without a doubt. And just being like, I like this work, and I want to show it in the magazine. And I still get submissions, and if I like it, if someone sends me their images and it's images I like, I'm going, I'll do it. I'm always looking for new things, always kind of.
And how do you, I've always wondered how this works, and you can share what you can or not, but how does somebody get on the cover of a magazine? How do you figure that out?
Sometimes it's like timing, like maybe we'll do a wildlife issue and we have a great wildlife painting, but sometimes I try, it's just like, what is the most beautiful image we could find at this moment? And maybe there's a great snow scene, but it's summer, so it's like, oh, maybe, that won't work. But so a lot of it is timing, but some of it is just like an image that
And is that a group kind of discussion between your editors and yourself, or is that more
I'll sit down with my graphic designers and come up, and I'll pick and say, okay, this image is, so maybe we'll mock up like 5 or 6. And then we'll all sit around and look, and then we'll call up all the other assistant editors and say, hey, come check these out, and we'll talk about them, and then,
Do you have a favorite, let's say, for Western Art Collector? Is there one that you go, oh my God, that just really sticks out?
Gosh, what?
I know that's hard, putting you on the spot, but that's what we do on the Art Dealer Diaries.
Yeah. I'm trying to, so many.
Or how about one that didn't work?
There's one poster. So we make giant posters of the covers, and there's one Western Art Collector poster that hangs in my office, and it's the Ed Mel one where it's a buck and bronco, but it's done almost like Duchamp. Yeah. So there's like 5 different stages of him.
Oh yeah.
Doing that.
I remember that.
Oh, I think you had the painting.
That was
yours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, beyond belief, that's great. Josh Elliott does wonderful paintings that they're just so picturesque. They just make for such beautiful covers.
His Saguaro ones I thought was very interesting that you used, the way that you actually used the Saguaro to go through the lettering.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was different and unique. And I thought, wow, it really popped. And, it's important for me. When I look at anything, a magazine, whatever, or my books, or any other books, you're drawn in. And if you don't have a good cover, it can be a problem. And you always seem to really think about that and come up with that right thing.
Well, and a lot of it also with this American Fine Art magazine is seeing those works of like those early guys, like N.C. Wyeth. Like I think that's him right there. He's been because he just knew they were early illustrators and they knew how to tell a story in like one image. So N.C. Wyeth continually blows us away on every occasion.
And Dixon's not bad, is he?
Dixon's
either for just a graphic. I mean, he did so many magazines covers in his day.
Oh my gosh, he knew how to just
so I'm going to jump ahead to the Native American magazine, because you've kind of taken that whole field by storm, and that's only been 2.5 years. Yeah, right.
Well,
tell us about that.
Okay, well, so I've always had a passion for Native art, and when we did Western Art Collector, this is like 2008, we came to Indian Market and would come and cover the Native art show for Western Art Collector. And I had always wrote about Native artists and put them in the magazine. I hired Christy Vazolis to write a column for me every other issue on contemporary, and historic Native art, and in the Western Art Collector. And so we're always coming to market for that. And the first year I came was 2008, and Dallin maybe won Best of Show, and Dallin became the director of Indian Market. His tenure ended this year, but he was the director for the last 4 years, and he was a law student at ASU. And so I met him. He's like, I just won Best of Show. Tell your dad I'm going to be late for his class. So we connected early on. In one of my first visits, and I got to meet. And actually going back. Oh, okay. Well, there's another part I haven't told, but
tell it.
So after doing the New Times and deciding that was just not fun, I started writing for local newspaper. I started writing for national magazines. So I wrote for Art News. I wrote for Art Forum. I interviewed James Turrell for Art Forum and wrote an article about him.
Did you get to meet him and talk to him?
I did. And one of the highlights of my art career, after I started writing for Art News, Art Forum, and then I started my own magazine in Phoenix, and it was called Shade, and it was art, literature, film, what you name it, architecture. And it was just that. Beautiful. And if you go to downtown art studios, people still have it on their shelves. And so after about the first issue, for some reason, you know how these cities do these like press tours. So Pittsburgh called and said, "Oh, we have this press tour. Can you come and do this press tour of Pittsburgh?" And they take you to the Warhol Museum. And one of the places they took it to was the Mattress Factory. It's this really cool art space. It's in an old abandoned mattress factory. And they had just installed a James Turrell sky space.
Who is a land artist, for those who don't know. I mean, doing amazing thing in Arizona as well.
Right, and he's from, and doing up the crater, and he was there, and so they had this incredible opening night that lasted 24 hours, and part of it was going into it was one of the sky spaces that's outside, like of the museum. So we all, like 50 people, went into the sky space with him, with James Turrell, at about 4 in the morning, right, half hour before sunset, and he narrated the process. Okay, go outside, take a look at the sky, okay, come back in, look up, see what you see, and like talked us through it. And that was like, that was incredible. That was amazing. I haven't seen him since. That was like 2002. So
he's still making art.
Yeah,
it's gotten a lot more expensive.
Right. I should have got something back then. And so I started my own magazine called Shade, and we did it for 3 years, and it was amazing. And I met Steve Yazzie, who's a Navajo artist, and we became really good friends. And at the time, remember the murals that used to be in the first floor of the Herd? He did all those. So I'd go down to the studio and watch him paint, and I put him on the cover, and then he introduced me to Doug Miles, Apache Skateboards. And this was like 2000, 2001, and I met Doug. We like hit it off right away. I actually I went out to my partner and I drove out to the Apache Reservation and met Doug and watched them, skateboard, and he took all these beautiful photos, and we did this whole article on it. And we put one of those on the cover back then. So I'd always known Doug and all that things. And then the first time I came to Santa Fe Indian Market, 2008, we reconnected, and he introduced me to his daughter and to his friends and to Melissa Cody, who's a textile artist, amazing textile artist, and then to Thomas Breeze Marcus, who's a Phoenix artist from the Pima Salt River, and him and I became really good friends. So So you had
a natural affinity. You knew the people.
I knew it.
You liked their art, and you had been around it.
Yeah.
And you grew up in Arizona.
And I grew up in Arizona, and then I was here, so I'd always come out. We'd give a Western Art Collector Award to a Native artist. I'd come to the Best of Show. I'd walk around. I met even more people, and then I was out in 2014. And Leroy Garcia from Blue Ring Gallery said, "Hey, do you know the magazine American Indian Art?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And there's a whole thing I haven't told. So he said they're not going out of business. They just decided to close their doors.
Yeah, she got tired of doing it.
She got tired of doing it.
And I think it was not even tired of doing it. It was just a lot of work. She did it all by herself. It was a great magazine.
Right.
But there's a time, and she didn't want to sell it because she just wanted to end going out on a high note.
Right. Yeah. So I called my boss. I'm like, "We're doing this, but we're doing historic and contemporary. This contemporary world, native art world, is going. It's about to just explode." He's like, "Okay," and he lives in Australia. He says, I said, "Trust me, this is going to happen." And 3 months later, we had the first magazine out.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and that was 2016.
16. Yeah. So the very first year, so we've been in existence for 3 years, and 2 of them we've been the official magazine for the Santa Fe Indian Market,
including this year for 2018.
Yeah. But what we're talking about my grandfather in St. Paul. So my great grandfather came over from Germany and went through New Orleans and up to St. Paul, and they became fur traders. So they were fur traders in St. Paul, Minnesota, and
they may have known mine.
What's that?
Mine were too. Bill Sublette.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
Took the first wagon train across the Oregon Trail.
Really?
Yeah.
And they were like 1880, 1890. So, and my grandfather loved all that. And so my parents have some things still, that they had traded for furs. So they have some beautiful, they have a Ojibwe bandolier bag, they have a jacket, and
so you also grew up with it too, around you.
And my grandfather loved Ernest Thompson Seton, all of his books. He loved Will James. He used to tell us words in Sioux. And a lot of times when I'm at having these great moments and, and meeting these people and going to these beautiful places, I'm like, it's him. I know it's him. It's all, and he was a great storyteller, and he'd tell us all these, wonderful stories about hunting and fishing in St. Paul in the 40s and 50s. So a lot of it definitely. And
would you say that magazine is the most successful of the, at least from just pure advertising? It's so big. It's a thick magazine. I'm just shocked every time I see it.
It's doing incredibly well, and it's the only one out there. And I think we're passionate about it, and we love it, and I think people are responding to that. And we're keeping it affordable for people.
And it's every other month, right? And you can get it either in bookstores or magazine places, or you can get a subscription, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's funny when I said we're doing historic and contemporary. That's what we're going to do. We're doing native art. We're going to do both. And better than most people, those worlds don't really connect.
It's not as much an intersect as you would think it might be.
So, but it's working, and it's managing to work, and I think dealers love it, the artists love it. People are, I was talking to people at the antique show, and they're like, it just makes the whole market look like it's thriving and happening. And when I started, they said, okay, American Indian Art was a great magazine, but it was kind of preaching to the choir. This is your job, Josh. Go out there and you have to find these new collectors. And I've took that on pretty, that responsibility, and getting more people involved and making the magazine. My thing is, I don't want it to be academic. I want it to be accessible. And I take a little heat from that. Why aren't you publishing these, 12-page articles with tons of footnotes? And I'm like, well, dealers like the same people like those, but readers want to read accessible things where they can
correct
things that like you do, like this is how to start collecting Navajo rugs, and this is how Pueblo pottery. And so I think they're informative, and they're interesting, and they're definitely written from an authoritative perspective, and we have the people that know their stuff writing, but they're just not pedantic or kind of over the top when it comes to the academic, but it's good information.
Yeah, because you want a lot of those articles, even though I specialize in Native American art, sometimes I'd find them so dry it's hard to read.
Well, and they're just so narrow. It's like
possible bags from 1830 to 1870.
Yeah, or 1830 to 1832 from this one region of the and so,
which is fine if you're into those, but I do like the fact that magazine covers a variety of material, all Native American types, a lot of contemporary as well, and gets people involved. I think you can learn a lot. I read those. There's things that go, oh, that's very interesting.
And it's been neat to see. It's one of those things that just kind of comes together. Like I'll say, let's do a article, let's do a whole section. We've been doing those special sections that usually consist of about 5 to 8 articles about that topic. Like
jewelry, right?
Yeah, let's do Pueblo pottery, and then someone will call me. Oh, I just wrote a book on Pueblo pottery. Well, do you want to use an excerpt? So it's just coming together so nicely and perfectly. And my designer, I think, did a wonderful job putting it all together. It just looks good. It looks sharp, and it's good information. In this new issue, we did the Indian Market issue, and it's the Indian Market magazine. So I thought, okay, do we just have a bunch of features? No, let's what do collectors need that are going to help them buy at Indian Market? So we did a guide for every category. Who's hot, who's emerging, who are kind of the classic standard bearers of that field, and then we called all the dealers. Hey, so tell us about give us some pointers on collecting jewelry, on collecting pottery, on collecting beadwork, and so all that information in that guide is like good stuff and then here are a bunch of artists doing that style, and I think it has to be accessible and it has to be useful, and that's my goal.
And do you think a lot of people, it seems like a lot of magazines, especially even art magazines, are struggling, but that doesn't seem to be the case for all your 4 magazines.
No, we're thriving, I think. And it's funny because people hear these buzzwords and they think they have to do it, and then they try it, and then they always come back. And I was talking to a big auction company in New York City that does more print, And about 2 years ago, they said, this is for American fine art, because that's historic American painting. They said, we're not doing print anymore. We're going to go digital. We're going to do this and this and this. So he calls me 3 weeks ago. He's like, we're doing print again. So, you know, and
people do like print. There are people who like print.
Yeah. And I think everything that's good comes back. I have 2 kids, 24 and 17. They listen to vinyl and they take film photography. They shoot film photography. And I think...
And now they'll listen to this podcast.
Hopefully. And, you know, I think people love... And I went to the LA Print Fair, LA Art Book Fair for several years. And you go there and there's people doing zines and selling little handmade books and all those things. And it's, you know, people love print. And I don't think it will ever... You know, it's obviously digital has had an effect on news magazines.
Right. So you add the websites, you add the content that way, but you also have print. And then do you find, it seems like there's a change when I look at the magazines, all magazines that are art magazines, there's less galleries advertising and there's more artists, auctions, and shows. Is that a true statement, or is it just me?
I think that has been the case, definitely, and I don't know why. I love the support from everyone, but it means a lot to me when galleries are doing it and in there. But I have noticed, especially American Art Collector deals with more of kind of the, you know, gallery that you'll find on Canyon Road or in Main Street or in Tucson or in Jackson Hole and Bozeman and those places. And a lot of those galleries who have kind of been on the fence kind of for maybe the last 3 or 4 years, I'm finding them come back. And literally, like, right as we speak, like the last 2 months, all these galleries that I haven't heard from in a long time are like, and I don't know if it's just because the economy is better and people are selling, but they're like, okay, we're doing these shows, you know, and it just seems like...
It does work. I can tell you as a gallerist that print ads do work if you get the right magazine. For me, it's usually Western Art Collector and Native American Art, and those do work. I get sales, I get people who read them. So those people who are out there listening to this, go ahead, sign up. Reasonable rates, and you get to work with a wonderful person occasionally, which is the editor, Josh. It's just so fun to have gotten to spend a little time and kind of get to know who you are and where you come from. I'll never look at English literature or poetry.
Or William Blake.
Or William Blake. Again, now that I know where your roots come from.
And I've interviewed you so many times. I'm going down to your gallery and setting up and talking about rugs, and what you do is amazing, seriously. And I'm not just saying that because I've talked to many people about this, like doing the gallery, podcast, the videos. I'll say like, hey, Mark, we're doing an article on, collecting jewelry or Navajo rugs or Pueblo pottery or Maynard Dixon. And a week later, you've written a 2,000-word article about it. I'm like, so, Well, then novels on top of it. 7 novels. I mean, I want to write one someday.
You can do it.
You've written 7.
Well, the novels are fun. They're for me and for the people who enjoy those stories. And the other stuff is to get the word out, just like this podcast. It's fun for me because I get to learn about people and learn about our industry and hopefully leave some kind of record for those who follow and go, oh, wow, I had no idea that's where this began, or this is how it is. And I hope more dealers do those kind of things. It takes a little bit of effort, but I do it because I like it.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, and it's just making it happen. Like here we are, a Sunday morning. You got up at, you could have been sitting on your porch, looking at the view, having a nice coffee. But here we are. You're doing
much
it.
More fun.
Yeah,
much more fun.
And just being able to make it happen like that. It's amazing, and it's I think it really benefits everyone. And all the collectors and the artists and the people in the industry. I know we did you mentioned we did an article on the podcast, but I've been hearing people talking about it. And it's like the Native magazine. It's the only one only person really doing it. And I think it
takes time, effort, and you want to have to do it. And I enjoy doing this as much as I do actually selling art or even looking at art to some extent. There's a different form. Everybody has something to bring to the table that I didn't know about, and boy, it just gives you a bigger insight into I'll never look at you quite the same as I did before because I know your backstory, and now everyone who listens to it does too, and they're all going to say, "Oh, Minneapolis, are you? Mate, come on." Sorry about that.
How'd you end up there? But those were beautiful moments, and the Native magazines. So we do them, we do all 4, and it's amazing just to go from all the different worlds associated with each magazine, but the native magazines is
give us the magazines one more time before we close this up, so they know what they are.
American Art Collector was the first, and that's kind of I would call contemporary realism. Living artists doing painting in mainly a representational way, but we stray a bit too. And then Western Art Collector, historic and contemporary Western art. And by Western, we know it's also wildlife and landscapes and sporting art and all that. And galleries, auctions, events, those kind of things. And then American Fine Art, classic American painting, Homer, Hopper, Sargent, O'Keeffe, Taoist founders.
Dixon,
of course. Yeah, and that's like early, Golden Age illustrators, mainly 1750 to 1950 for American Fine Art.
Okay.
And then Native Art, historic contemporary Native Art. And it's like I said, the Native Art magazine, it's been such a joy to put together. I love the historic dealers. I love seeing the things they're able to find and come together. And the contemporary artists just meeting. And the reason people come to Indian Market, the reason 80,000 people come there every year is because you buy directly from the artists. They're right there selling their own work and being able to connect with them on that level, and the warmth and the friendliness and the personalities. It's and the creativity, and we're used to paintings and sculpture. Now you see jewelry and pottery and
the whole gamut,
beadwork. It's incredible. Yeah.
So now that you have it, those are the magazines. Go out and subscribe.
Yes.
And thank you so much, Josh, for coming.
Thank you, Mark.
It was great.
Yeah.
And now I'll let you get back to work. He's got to run back and man a booth in Albuquerque. And thank you for coming in.
My pleasure. Right. Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. It's
great.
It's definitely needed.
I love it, man. It's fun.
Awesome.
Thanks.